Was out here at one time, and my oldest one turned 40 this year. So we have the gamut. We have the gamut. Keeps us happy.
What if, like, there's two parents in the house, and the father is abusing the child, and then the father makes a threat? Would the foster or CDC relocate the mother and the child?
You're a good question, and you're talking pre-removal, right? If this is in the birth home, and frankly, you know, this often is the case. Often it's not both parents who are abusing the children. Sometimes there is that male, or it can be the female, and unfortunately for you guys, it is typically the male that is the abuser, but we are smart enough to know that it can be either or. And frankly, if that other person that's in that household, the other adult, makes the conscientious choice that I will protect my child, I need out of this relationship, that child could very well be returned to that parent without the abuser in the home. So we don't really pick up mom and relocate her with the child somewhere else. That really has to be of her own volition to say, hey, you need out of here, and we'll do what we can to support that whole concept. But it has to be a decision made by the person that's living with the abuser. Yes, sir.
What if foster parents abuse foster children?
What if foster parents abuse foster children? Again, something we really hope doesn't happen because we screen foster parents heavily. But we also give them children who have learned some survival skills that are pretty tough to deal with. And sometimes kids are hurt by foster parents because of I don't know, whatever. They've lost their patience and what have you, and have stepped over the line. When that happens, depending upon the situations, the child may be immediately removed from that home. But at the very least, then there's an investigation in the foster home as well as to what's going on. So we do our best to protect kids. Yes, ma'am?
How often do foster kids come in?
How often do foster kids come in? Well, what I can tell you about that is, you know, we might go weeks and weeks and weeks and no kids come in. And lo and behold, we have a week where we take 10 kids in, which gets a little crazy because a lot of paperwork, because the state, anything done by the state has paperwork. But at any rate, so there's no rhyme or reason to it. We tend to see more kids coming into care at the end of school years because teachers are calling and concerned about situations in home, and so they're making those phone calls, one last ditch effort to try to protect kids over the summer. We sometimes see more kids coming in during this upcoming seasons of Thanksgiving and Christmas because it heightens the stress in homes, and so we see more kids coming in there. But in Lenawee County, and I can't speak for the whole county, but I mean for the whole state or what have you, nationwide, but in Lenawee County, any given time, there's probably at least 150 kids in foster care. So there's probably kids that you aren't even aware are foster kids that are walking their halls or have been in foster care. Yes, ma'am. Oh, look, there's some more questions.
Is there does sometimes neighbors report it because they can see it happening?
Yeah, sometimes neighbors report, yes, kind of that reporting mechanism. It doesn't matter who reports. Teachers are mandated reporters, doctors are mandated reporters, school social workers, what have you. There's a lot of mandated reporters. That means if they see abuse, regardless of where it is, regardless of whether they know who it is, they're mandated to report. But neighbors, yes, sometimes other parents.
If you have multiple children, let's say it's just one incident with a child that needs to be removed, and they do need all children to be removed, or is it just the child that it was reported on?
There you have it. I think,
We have a lot of students,
yes, Mrs. Garno's asking if the abuse is happening to only one child, is only that child removed, or are all of the siblings removed? And I would have to tell you that would probably be a case-by-case situation as to what the extent of it was. I am aware that we have had kids whose parental rights were terminated while the other kid goes home. You know, but that's rare exception, and I would say as a general rule, until we can sort that all out, yes, all of the children would come into care and then work backwards.
No, I mean, maybe just
Right.
one case was reported, but you have all these
Right.
children at home.
and much of that is up to PS to try to sort out, you know, is this going on with other kids but they're just not saying? Or is it really this kid? And I think systematically what we think of then is, okay, so if we took Susie out, would the perpetrator then go after the next, I don't know, logical child, whether it's by age or what have you? So typically I would say they're gonna remove them all until they can sort it out and slowly move them back in.
How did your biological kids friend react?
I'm sorry, what?
Like, if you have your biological kid has a friend over and your foster kid is there, how does that friend react?
Good question. She's asking if my birth child had a friend over, how would the friend react to the foster care? And you know, the information for foster kids is all very confidential. Like even for my own children, I would have never ever given them all of the gory details of the child that was placed in our home. Because you know what kids do? Kids are really cool and they're really, you know, we're all a part of this. But you know what? That foster kid crosses that kid and they're telling the whole neighborhood that this child was sexually abused and that their dad's in prison and what have you. They don't have that ability to not share that information. So for our birth children, or if we had other foster children in the home at the time and we were getting a new child, we told them what we had to tell them to keep them safe, okay? We talked about boundaries again, reminding everyone, you know, we always did that in a general format, not saying, by the way, this child has a problem with boundaries and they're gonna walk in on you and, you know, or whatever. No, we just kind of reminded them the rules of the household, we knock on closed doors and what have you. So how they react, who knows? But our friends and the kids that came to the house knew we were foster parents. So, you know, that was like, you know, my husband worked second shift during most of that time, and so he was sometimes surprised too, because that was before cell phones, when you could just call and say, hey, by the way, I'm taking a placement today. So sometimes he came home to find a strange child at home also.
When a child gets taken away, do any of the other relatives have a chance to take them in?
Good question. We covered that before. That's another nice positive thing in the scheme of child welfare right now, and that is that we try to place children with relatives if at all possible. They have to meet the same standards as a normal foster parent, but we can place immediately with a relative without them being licensed. They have to do clearances and what have you, but after that initial stuff is kind of found out and it's safe, then we can do that. It's a very plus, good plus.
If the how long do the children stay at the same school
And
as?
I wish. That's an excellent question. Do the children stay at the same school? And we keep saying the children are not to blame, the children are not to blame, but who gets caught up in all of that? Often they are not in the same school because we don't have a foster home in that school system where we can place the child. If school has been a very positive situation for the child, then we really do our best. In fact, we have taken kids who have come out of care in Adrian, have placed them in Tecumseh, and that's another thing that child welfare is recognizing. If that school is within a reasonable travel distance, we will get the kids back to that school, at least until the end of the year. Same way if removal happens in April. We've driven all over the county. Last year I transported kids from Adrian and Tecumseh back to Addison because they had to move in January. We started that and I drove that every day, getting them to and from school so that they could remain in that school. Now this year they're still in care and they're in the schools where they're at, but we just felt that was really important. There had been enough craziness for them that we felt the school was a very positive place.
Has there ever been a kid that tried to lie about being in foster care?
Has there ever been a case with a child lie about being in foster care? If you were a foster child, would you lie about it?
I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, I'm here seeing some nods. You know, you do because you feel as if it makes you different. I mean, in truth, it isn't. It's just one of those things in our lives. But I can give you an example of that. We had a child who was with us, actually the same child actually as I'm thinking back, that was running on the car. But she was involved in a Girl Scout troop, and at that time I worked for the Girl Scouts in Jackson. So she was involved in a Jackson troop because Adrian didn't have any troops for teens. And I transported her over there. We got her there for the meetings and what have you. She was in that troop for over a year before the leader even knew that she was just a foster child. She just assumed she was one of our children. So it wasn't like she was really lying about it, but you know, you don't go in saying, oh, by the way, here you have it. And in this day and age, because we have so many blended families, the fact that her name was different than ours was not a big deal. Just, you know, it was kind of accepted. And she wouldn't have found out except the child began to complain about how she was treated so differently because she was a foster child. And the leader said, what? You know? So, yeah, kids will lie about that because they think situationally that it's a better deal for them. So I'm looking for different faces.
If the child gets adopted, does the last name change at all?
Actually, that becomes, he's asking if the child is adopted, does the last name change automatically? No. That's a decision between the child and the foster parents or the adoptive parents. And probably typically, I would say, you know, with younger kids, yes, they usually change their name. But kids that are old enough to have a voice, you know, sometimes they hyphenate the two names, and other times they're adopted, but they keep their biological. When my children started showing up in the court listings, I wish they had kept their biological names, but I love them just the same. But I mean, it is one of the things that as an adoptive parent, you just never think that was where it was going to be. So, but more memories we didn't really need, but we love them. We can laugh at it now. Yes.
What if, like, people who are trying to figure out what happened in the home, the mother taken out, what if, like, the kid lied to them about what happened and the kid get punished?
What happens if the kid lied about the circumstances? That's a good question. And would they get punished? Well, they're going to punish themselves because they're going to learn that all households have rules. We were dealing with this with my granddaughter last night, and she saying to her mother, when is my real mother coming along? And she said, I am your real mother. And you're stuck with me. But, you know, it's one of those things that kids do. But typically, you know, if they haven't lied about the situations, and typically you would not be removed just because some kids came to school and said, hey, you know, my dad beat me last night, so you're out of the household. I mean, they're gonna investigate, and they're gonna know if there's other people there that can support what that child is saying. And it probably is not a good reason to punish the child, but like I say, the child they'll punish themselves if that's the case, because they'll have to live with that, and that's worse than
Okay,
anything anybody can give.
I have 2 questions.
2 questions.
So-
Can we give him 2?
What if a foster child were to celebrate different holidays in the family? And do teachers know who the foster children are in their class, or even if there are any?
Good question. I'm not real sure what teachers know, but I would say then in a broad sense of it, because of, as a foster parent, when I come in to register this child, I have to bring court papers with me and what have you to say that this child has permission to be in my home, but that I'm not their parent. And on your emergency slip, it says who can have contact with the child. So probably if a teacher is reading that child's file, they would know that. But a teacher's not going to go out and spread that word and what have you. And what was your second? It was 2
Different holidays.
Oh, different holidays. That would fall probably in the religion. I mean, if we had kids with different holidays that they celebrated, we'd probably try to honor that a little bit. But I can't think of real situations where that's really happened a great deal. We're pretty Anglo-Saxon here with Christian holidays. Yes, ma'am. So she's asking what happens then if the parent comes to the school who has lost custody of their child. I have to tell you that's one of the things that we encourage right now. Where it's reasonable, we would encourage that parent to come to like Christmas programs or conferences. Sometimes we do those in conjunction with another caseworker or the foster parent. But in truth, if there is a no contact order and they check in at the office, hopefully the office is checking that and saying, we really
have
can't.
that information.
Okay.
And they have it in the office of those kind of, well, are usually court ordered.
Right.
So